And maybe Kelly, do you want to make people automatically go on mute? Because I see some people are coming in and having to mute themselves. Do you want to set it so it's just the default is mute? Okay, because someone just came in and they're not muted and I don't know how to mute. So just to keep it cleaner.
They are muted as they're coming in.
Okay, great. Maybe they're just unmuting.
Well, this is fun.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for being on time.
The ones that are on time?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could use this time if people want to go find the chat box, especially for people that haven't Zoomed yet, find your little chat button and open up your chat. And then that could be a place if people have questions that they did. If you've already submitted a question through the application process, we have that. And Carrie's going to be fielding those. But if you have any questions that come up throughout, we're going to wait until the end of each section to address the question. So if you want to submit a question, you can just type it in that chat there.
Well, and why don't I do, this is Kelly. I'm up here in this, I'll wave a little bit. There's a couple things and we'll do a more formal housekeeping when we get started here in a minute. But the chat, if you're on a computer screen, the chat is the little chat bubble down at the bottom. And I have it set up so that you can chat privately to individuals by clicking on the blue chat button. So if you see a friend, you can chat privately to them and say, hey, hi. Carrie Bush, who says MN WIFT board by her, she's waving. She's going to be collecting all of our questions as we go so that Patrick Pariseau and Catherine Campion, who is our moderator, will be able to focus on the conversation and the information as we go. So if you have any specific questions about the topic, please chat your question to Carrie Bush. If you have any Zoom questions, chat them to me. I'm Kelly, I'm the treasurer for MNWIFT. You can, we're not going to be too crazy about any of this. If you want to raise your hand for any reason, click on the participants button at the bottom. That should give you a little bunch of icons and you should see the chat or the raise hand button. You should also see a reactions button at the bottom, so you can do things like clap or give people a thumbs up to react to things. And again, if you have any questions about Zoom, chat them to me. If you have any questions for our speaker, thank you, Patrick, for being here, or for Catherine, chat them to Carrie and she'll feed them to them as we go, so that they're not distracted by our chit chat over on the right hand side.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm not sure, there was a question already that Sandra was saying the only two people are Kelly and Carrie. It actually, if you put anything right now, it's going to go to everyone unless you select Kelly or Carrie, but I'm not sure. It looks like maybe this isn't set up to privately chat if you see your friend and you want to send something personally to them. Mine isn't currently set up for that. I don't know if anyone else is able to send a private message to an attendee.
It says...
I have it set that way.
Okay, so mine just says Kelly, Carrie, and everyone as my three choices. That's fine.
Oh, really? Oh,
but it sounds like maybe Sandra has the same situation where she's not able to privately message people.
I did not set it up that way, but maybe. I know Zoom is doing all sorts of things where we as account owners, they're making things happen that we don't set up. So perhaps that's one of their safety things that they've done now. I don't know. Okay, we've still got some people coming in, but do you want to get started? Jody, do you want to introduce yourself and welcome folks?
Yes, hello. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your beautiful day at home to join us. I'm just very pleased that new board members and rejoining member Catherine Campion have all put this together. It's just, I think it's really important for all of us to be up to date and really on top of what's going on for us financially as self-employed freelancers. So my name is Jody Lichter. I am president of Minnesota Women in Film and Television. And for those of you who are not familiar with our group, we are the local chapter that was founded in 2005 out of the 26 US chapters and over 40 chapters around the world under the umbrella of Women in Film and Television International, WIFT. So MNWIFT is made up of all kinds of women and men who support, educate, promote, and do whatever we can to make women visible in the industry, have equal job opportunities, equal job pay, have their work promoted and seen, and that is what we do. And this is our first educational meeting since we all went into prison. And I shouldn't be so negative. Since we all were quarantined, I'm just very excited about it. I've spent a couple of other sessions with some other WIFT groups around the country, and I'm just very grateful to have Patrick here and Catherine's experience to share with us. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess I'll take the lead from here. So we're going to go in order of the first thing we're going to talk about. This was kind of a last minute addition, is we've noticed that there are some people who still haven't received their $1,200. What is the name again, Patrick, of the economic
stimulus checks? We just call them the stimulus checks. It was brought out in the bill where everyone would get a certain dollar amount based on it, would get sent out there in the form of a check. In reality, it's not a check, it's a wire. And that's causing some of your problems, which I'll explain here if you want me to go right in. Just to give you a little background on me, I've been in banking for probably 40 years. I now work for Meda, Metropolitan Economic Development Center. I've been there 8 years. Meda helps entrepreneurs of color, and we do a lot of work in the areas of SBA lending, different types of programs across the cities and across the state. We're a national organization. We have our own equity fund, which we get a lot of folks who apply for $1 million challenge every year. We give $1 million in the form of equity to businesses that are startup, from startup all the way to people who have $10 billion worth of contracts. So my experience is in the banking sector, in the finance sector. I've been doing it for a long time. You notice they have no hair in the head and gray. I've been at it for a while. Since this started, taking about 200 to 300 emails a day. So I've lost a few more of my valuable hair up there, but that's okay. I told my wife a long time ago I wasn't getting any prettier. So I will talk about the checks a little bit. Some folks are struggling with a couple of things that have come up. So a lot of people who do your tax filing with TurboTax or H&R Block or one of the preparers, what you perceive is the fact that you put your banking information on there. But if you ask for an immediate refund, what has happened is the preparer, TurboTax, HR, doesn't put your wire information out at the IRS under your tax return, because what happens is they will give you your refund earlier, and then they take the money when the refund comes in to pay the loan off or whatever you had from that standpoint. A lot of these guys make that work independently. They didn't tell you that that's what they were doing. So you probably have thought you put your wire information or your banking information on your tax return, and they really didn't. So what you need to do is make sure you go out and check the site, add your tax ID number in there, and it'll tell you if you're missing your tax information or there's something else going on from that standpoint. Another indicator is that when they did come back, when they initially started this and they didn't see the wire information, they waited a few days because nobody checked on it or gasped the information. And of course, they, like the SBA, have difficulty in communications with people. So if they didn't get communications, they elected to throw it into a pool that would get a manual check, an actual hard copy check. And that goes to a different department within the IRS. They produce the check at that point for a check order. Anybody who has a business knows that if you do it electronically, it's really easy, but if you got to go cut a check, it takes more time. So those checks have been delayed probably a week, but you need to keep checking. If there's other issues, you need to contact the IRS. If you didn't file your 2018 taxes, that was another issue that they were talking about, that they couldn't verify that you had income. They only went back a year instead of going back multiple years. So you probably will have to give them a call to make sure that that's happening from that standpoint and go forward on that. There's a time to be patient, but there's also a time to make sure that you get a hold of them, especially if you're looking and you need the money. Stay on them a little bit. They'll probably put you on hold. There's been a long wait and lots of questions. But I've heard from many, many people who initially went in, it was the wire information or the banking information. So that captured a lot of those. So a lot of that has happened. So now you probably will have the ability to move forward with questions you may have or whatever. If you think you are eligible, you need to contact them on their site. Make sure that you figure out how to get the information that they need to move ahead. They're still taking faxes. They're still taking some emails, but you'll probably have to talk to a representative to get the instructions on what you need to do from that standpoint.
Well, if you'll notice in the chat, Carrie has already pasted the link for the federal economic impact payments. So it should only take you a few minutes. You can even do it while we're on this chat. Just go to that website that Carrie posted, and it might be something like they just need your bank info, even though you gave it during your taxes, or they might, like mine currently says they're cutting me a check on the 24th. For some reason, I'm not getting the direct deposit. So if you're wondering where that money is and you've checked your bank and it's not in there, go to the link that Carrie just pasted. Follow the instructions, and you should at least know when where your money is and when it's coming. So with that, we can probably move on to the next section, the Minnesota unemployment insurance. So Carrie can also post that link. I'm assuming most people have already at least attempted to apply, and probably a lot of us have not yet received anything yet. And we often have zeros in our account. So now Patrick can explain. First of all, we could go through, if anyone wants to put in the chat that they actually haven't applied yet and they want those instructions, Carrie can post the instructions that are specifically for self-employed 1099 income. But if you've already applied via the old way or with these instructions, then we can, if nobody needs to know how to do that, we can just move on to explaining what's currently going on, what's coming down the pike, and any steps you can take to speed up that process.
So I'll start. Normally self-employed individuals normally won't get qualified for unemployment, but under the Stimulus Act, under the COVID Act, Congress passed the ruling that said there was a certain allocation of dollars that would go through the process, and also put each state individually on a process of approving self-employed individuals through a different process that's a little bit different from the way the standard unemployment works. That is 1099 income, and as a owner and only owner employee. So those conditions, when you go into the website out there, you'll see a lot of things at the state that says this is coming, right? The information. But Minnesota, by nature, was one of the first at the congressional level to adopt the self-employment unemployment situation. In addition to that, if you are already on unemployment and you're in the situation where you did have W-2 income and you did make the normal qualifications on 3,000 and moving forward with the regular requirements on there, you can get an additional 600 per week, which was part of the stimulus package also. So a lot of people have added on to their unemployment because it was very small. Some people are confused by this and saying, well, based on the requirements of the old unemployment, the way I normally would file, they would give me that dollar amount and I won't qualify for that because I don't make enough money. The legislature and everybody understands that completely. So my rule of thumb is apply for everything you can possibly do out there, and then they'll call you back at some point. It might be delayed a little bit, but at that point in time, they're not worried about trying to qualify you as much on income as they had in the past on 1099 income. They're really looking at the idea that they want everybody to have at least a minimum of the $600 per week on that type of employment side. So they up that a little bit. They're not worried about if you got too much money, they're not going to ask for it back. So if you luck out and you go through the process and somebody gives you a bunch of money, they're not going to come back after you and try and sue you for the rest of the money because you didn't qualify. They're just assuming that they're going to take that and that money was set aside for that particular opportunity. So when in doubt, file. If you haven't, or you're afraid of filing on the paperwork and going through that process, I understand that completely. On 1099s, they're a little bit tricky when you start adding up what those dollar amounts are. There's all kinds of different 1099s in the banking world. We have 1099 interest, we have 1098s for mortgage interest, we have all of these things that start with a 1090, whatever. We're looking for the 1099s, and in the boxes that you'll see in there, actually Kelly and I looked at one last night, and it says not included in for unemployment purposes or for income purposes. So normally we have a 1099 that comes out if you're doing contract labor work, self-employment. That description in that box will tell you exactly what that is. And at that particular point in time, you would not add that into your total if you get questioned on it. So those are the things that they're looking for on that. that process is supposed to work. You know, I've talked to several people that have gotten some success with going through the process. But again, the hotline should be coming down a little bit if you have questions, or if you need to, you can email me. I think I saw my email go out to everybody. If you have a big problem or there's not accepting it or whatever, since I am doing the deed loans and we're doing a lot of them, I actually can call deed directly and I'll get an answer. I'll ask for you on your behalf and say that we have a person who has this situation. Why aren't they getting that from that standpoint? How do they get in quicker? What is the timeline on that? And some things like that from that standpoint. But we are hearing success in the program, that they're moving along those lines. We will possibly see more guidance on this coming from when the federal put this out. They wanted to get the money out as quick as possible. So the states were kind of throwing their hands up going, well, what do? We don't know what the qualifications are. However, DEED of Minnesota jumped on it right away and are trying to get some questions answered from the federal government on how this works, the way this should process. So we may see some updates. We may see that, you know, as Minnesota already has passed an unemployment extension out already. So you're already entitled to the extension. You'll get the 13 weeks, which will move forward from that. So that's already out there from that standpoint. So they are being pretty progressive. I would jump on the website and make sure if you haven't applied, apply. I would definitely do it. You'll hear me repeat this common theme throughout that's talked today. If when in doubt, apply for it. You know, if your business is in Minneapolis, they have grant money. If your business is in St. Paul has some money that's available. You want to look at the city sites also to see if within your city they're doing some things. It might be only $1,000 or $2,000, but I always tell people, I don't know about you, but I don't get paid $1,000 an hour.
Yeah,
An hour to apply, you should go for it. So as we continue on with those types of things on unemployment, we'll try and get out updates. You can actually check the Meda website. We don't have a lot out there on unemployment, but when I get in our office tomorrow, or I should say at my home, I'll make sure that our marketing department starts putting some changes out there. So there's a hot site that you can actually look at. Don't be afraid to call other people that are in the same place. You guys have a great network of people. This is not just happening in Minnesota. It's happening in California, which has a lot of gig employees out there that they're working through that process, different folks. So if you know them, ask them what's going on. You can just about project that the state of Minnesota is going to make some changes. I think you're going to see this going longer, depending on what the virus does here. Our governor has stated that if we don't see testing coming up, that we could be sheltered for a longer period of time. As that comes along, we're going to start seeing other programs kick into play and into effect. And we may see another extension beyond the 13 weeks is also being rumbled up at the Senate, talking about what if this goes longer as we take the city back up and we take the state back up, what businesses become priority and don't. The ones that don't probably will be in your category, so they'll probably get another extension. So we're hoping for that. We think it's warranted. We were very happy when we heard the self-employment come out, because we have a lot of self-employed people out there that are working in the state alone on people that are minorities as women and people of color. About 85% of those businesses are self-employed. So where your starting point is as a person of color or a woman, a minority, you guys get into business as a single employee or a single employer with part-time help from that standpoint. And really nobody's taking care of that situation. This was great when they did this. I think they could do a better job. I think this should be an ongoing program. If people are paying unemployment insurance on yourself and you're a self-owner or self-employed, they should do that. Those are some of the bills that will be coming out after the fact, because this is really tested, although it's a really bad situation, it's tested the unemployment situation for a lot of unemployed people to make an emphasis on the fact that there should be something out there. So if I have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them from that standpoint.
Yeah,
if you want to talk about
let's
it.
go back first. I realized we kind of breezed over, and there actually is a question, and there might be more questions coming in. The federal economic impact payments, which you're referring to as stimulus checks, and it's getting an error message now. My understanding, an error message means just try again, because they've got a lot of people checking. So if that's, Carrie, where you're getting stuck, or if that was some another person, but you might just need to log in again. Try in again.
I will tell you that's exactly what happens. The system becomes overloaded, and the state of Minnesota doesn't have an overload capability to put it into a Dropbox or a question. What they do is they send you an error text message that says you have a text message within the deal. Sign out, sign back in again, try it again. They'll go through that process. I've heard people that have tried it 5 to 6 times, change your time. There's busy periods of time and other periods that aren't as busy. So we're trying to have that going through that status not available answer. That's the situation where you probably are getting at a high volume of time from that standpoint. Try it again. And if not, at that point, please let them know that you're not getting through, because they're supposed to take every application regardless, is that situation. So it should give you a message back at that point once you're in. So
yeah,
I
and
would keep trying.
Once you're in, it's only going to ask you for your name, your social security number, your address, and your zip code. And then it's going to show you a message about where your check is. And it might say, we don't have banking info for you. Give us your checking account number and your routing number. And then it will tell you that it's going to come via the direct deposit. At this point, they're already cutting checks. So you might just have to wait a couple weeks for that check, but it'll let you know when that check is being sent.
That is correct. So
okay, and if any, unless anyone else, Carrie, do we have any other questions about that one in particular yet, or?
So just in the general chat, there's a question about payment status not available. Will you just say that again, like what you're supposed to do with if there's a payment status, you get that warning?
Yep. So if you're applying and it doesn't take your initial information, and it says payment status, not the message that goes out there, most likely the system is really overloaded, because we've been informed from the deed that they'll take, if you put your name and the information in there, that they will accept your application to start that process on the application process, or give you the cue of where you're headed. A lot of times what's happening is the system has got so many entries in it, it gives you what they call a status profile error. You can look at it and go back in and you'll plug it, say, you'll think it's your name. They don't match your name up. They don't match the social security number up, or they don't match the information up. Best thing is to sign out, sign back in, and try it again, and try a couple of times. And if that doesn't work, alternate your time, because what happens is people just get stacked up behind it, and they can only take so many in the queue at one time, and that it's overloaded, and then it gives you that message, is what we've been hearing. So we've had people who have tried it again another 2 hours later, or even a day later, and they got right through. So I try it a couple of times, but if it keeps giving you that answer, then it's time to make a phone call or try and figure out how we're going to make them contact. And at that point,
it can take a few days.
It will take a couple of days. When we first started seeing unemployment claims, people were applying for 4 days in a row before they actually got into the system. That has kind of come down quite a bit now. So we're thinking Indeed is monitoring that response. And if they're hearing about it, or they hear about it, make sure to let them know from that standpoint that you're not getting in, so they can move ahead. And if it goes on longer than 2 or 3 days or 4 days, then take a different alternative, because you're going to have to make a phone call to talk to somebody at that particular point in time. The state, of course, is still taking faxes, but we don't know how those match up with the volume. So best to leave, get to see if you can get a hold of somebody. You might be on wait for a long period of time. They have a helpline that's on the page over there.
Are you talking about the IRS? Because we're talking about the IRS website. Oh yeah, we were still talking about the previous topic of like people trying to on this $1,200 stimulus check.
On unemployment, they still have a hotline
conversation.
Yep.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the unemployment questions. We have a lot of really good questions coming in. So can you apply for unemployment if you have some work still coming in, but most of your contracts have been impacted by COVID?
So the answer is yes. You can still apply. So the question that comes back to again is whether you'll get approved under the unemployment based on that criteria. They're requesting everybody to apply to make sure that they'll give it to an alternate person. They have a specialized group that's already out there that are reviewing these on self-employed. You have to be a little bit patient. They might ask you a couple of questions on the comeback to ask how you're getting that money from that standpoint. Remember, they're not used to doing self-employed claims, so it's new to them from that process. But what I've heard is that they're accepting applications in that particular criteria if the money is coming through the deal, and they're also looking at averages. They're saying if you received your previous tax year, you're looking at the average in 2018, if you haven't got your 19 filed yet, or you've got a W-2 and a 1099, you need to make sure you include all of that within that situation, explain that to them. But it's my understanding that if you have more coming and it's pending, and it's like a receivable, they'll accept that.
And then, so we're talking about W-2 and 1099 income. Is there any other income that we report on our taxes, but we do not receive a 1099 or W-2? For instance, like a rental property that we have, or something where we get paid cash, like with dog walking or something. Is there a way to report that?
So it depends on if it's being recorded. So the state is looking at it and saying, are you actually reporting that as income? So if you're getting cash, most likely not. They're going to look at it and say, well, show me the lease contract. And if you can prove it going into your bank account and it shows up on your bank statement, they will probably take a look at that. But what people do sometimes is they get rental income or they're charging off expenses and they're not recording that. If you can't explain it with some type of paper background or some paperwork that shows it going into your bank statement, it's probably not going to get you qualified for that income. A lot of people are looking at it saying, and then this is where that 1099 comes into. The terminology for the IRS and the state of Minnesota on both the federal and taxes, ordinary income. So ordinary income has definition. So if you receive it from rental income and that's considered income that you're going to pay taxes on, that's considered ordinary income. If I'm if I'm an investment person and I'm receiving it because my stock went up at 3M, that's called investment income from that standpoint. That's taxed differently at the IRS as long-term gains or short-term gains as an investment. That does not qualify. If I'm getting reimbursed from somebody I had expenses that I applied to an employer and they gave me a 1099 back and said, hey, I gave you this because it was marked up from that standpoint, only the portion of the difference that you include in your taxes, because you're deducting your expenses out of that, is considered ordinary income.
And then are you expected, say you even have a roommate that pays you rent every year and you actually do report that money. So say it's included in your unemployment calculations. Then each week when you report, did you earn income? Do you then have to report the income you got from the tenants?
That's a good question. That's one of those that we're waiting on guidance on this from that standpoint. However, we're looking at the standpoint that if that gets denied, that would be taken out of the calculation. They're talking about if it is rental income and it's under a certain amount of money, based if under there, that they will take it out of the formula, but that you don't have to report it that you're receiving that money because of the fact that there's a kind of a threshold they're using for that, especially on self-employed. But that's an awfully good question because I've heard that one several times and I don't have a good answer. I don't think DEED has a good answer or the state, so they're waiting for some deal.
I'd be surprised if that were included.
At that particular point in time, I might just put it in my pocket, but that's me. Yep.
Okay, so the next question, this is going to apply to a lot of us because most of us in production and in this industry have both W-2s and 1099s. And now these people who had some W-2 over $3,000 in their base period, they've now found they've qualified for a very small weekly amount plus the 600, but most of their income is 1099. What should these 1099 people who either, whether they did or didn't, so there's going to be two categories. Some of these people did the self-employed thing and included it all, but of course it wasn't yet calculated in their rate. Or if they didn't, is there a good way for them to update and let the system know, oh, there's actually like $30,000 more money I didn't report because it wasn't W-2?
Yeah, that's a common problem that we've been hearing also is the way that the state is looking at it is you should include all of your income if it's 1099 and W-2 mixed. The problem we got is how to make the correction. We don't have a good process at the state level. I'm trying to get some guidance on that since you guys have asked me some of these questions in advance. I've been trying to talk to the state and saying, how do we amend that claim process? And how do we make sure that it works to get the verification in? I probably will be able to get an answer to you probably by midweek on that. How that you can correct them. Because I think a couple of the folks that I talked to last night are having the same issue. By sending it in by fax, they probably would pair it up and say, okay, there's the amendment side and can verify that there was a 1099 on that particular situation. However, we don't know what DEED does, state of Minnesota, once they get that fax, do they actually go look it up? It would be good if they come out with some guidance and said, here's a form to amend it. Right?
Well, there is a form.
Yep, there is.
Yeah, so there is a form, and DEED told me, I spoke to them on the phone, and they said what they're advising people for now is get that form. You'll either get it in the mail. Those of you that applied for unemployment a few weeks ago have maybe already received it in the mail. If you haven't yet, go into your account when you're able to log in and find this wage and employer correction worksheet and fill in yourself as self-employed, add up all your self-employed and report it as one employer, yourself, self-employed, and add that additional income in there and fax it into them. That was the latest thing they told me is the best way to correct it.
You are absolutely correct. You are spot on. And the problem is we don't know what they do with it when they get it and how fast they react to making the correction and what they send back to you to if they need verification. So that's the only things we don't know about. But that's the only, like I say, the only people in the world that's still taking a fax is the federal government and the state of Minnesota. So you're going to have to fight that system. I would follow that guideline. If you did get anything back or you don't get anything and it lasts a couple of more days, I would send it again.
And not just that form, they are encouraging us to send in copies of our 1099s and W-2s along with that form. That form has a barcode that is assigned to you, so make sure you're just using your form, and you can mail it in or fax it in. And for those who don't know, you don't need a fax machine to send a fax. Probably most people know you can just go online and find a service that'll fax it for you.
That is correct. So you guys got that one nailed. So I would make sure, because a lot of people originally, from what I heard, felt that they had W-2 income and only applied on the W-2 income. So it would be worthwhile, again, as I go back and repeat again, when in doubt, send the form in and send along the information. Send the 1099 information along with it so they have no excuse for not approving your claim. So those things are there. Again, watch your 1099s, because in that box, it's going to tell you whether that is actual income as ordinary income. If you send another one in, then you're going to get disqualified from that, expecting that to change from that standpoint.
Okay, and I see
you and I looked at one last night that you had one that was it was a
substantial 1099, but it was there was a box that said non-employee income, and I knew not to include it. I see someone was asking about how to send a fax without a proper office. Carrie, if you could just Google and find a few of those websites, I can't remember the name of the one I used, or if anyone actually has one that they love, if you could post a link in the comments for anyone who's never sent a fax without a fax machine. You can do it from your phone. There are free apps you can send a fax from your phone. And I recommend the fax just because it's got to get there a little faster than by mail. And then you have a receipt of the PDF that you sent into them showing, I sent this to you 3 weeks ago. So I recommend faxing with these applications. You can do that. So if anyone wants to post any recommendations for that. And then moving on.
Wait, hey, Catherine, just a follow-up question with that is, I had requests for some of my 1099 proof. Like, where do you send in your 1099 stuff again? Like, where's the link to send that in?
That is going to be a fax to the fax number on the UI link that you posted. So when you go log into your account, you go to contact and there's a fax number that there's just one number and it's a 651 number. You're going to fax that in and fax it all at the same time because you need to have that barcode attached to the fax. So if you send a 10-page fax, it's going to come to them as a single 10-page fax and they're going to know everything in that is attached to your barcode. If you send anything in without that barcode, good luck having them figure out, you're at the very least, you're slowing things down, and at worst, they might toss it out.
So just a tip. So on fax machines, I know this. So when you have a single fax machine at home on one page, you can put the one page in and it'll give you 35 seconds to put the next page in. It all stays on the same fax. That puts the barcode into the same system. If anybody is not technically sound on the fax machine. But some of the younger folks have never heard of that. So I remember, tell you how old I am. I was one of the first people that did a fax. It used to be an old tumbler and it'd go for 45 minutes for 4 words, but
oh my gosh.
It's a little faster than the mail right now. So I agree with you 100%, but you'll see a clock ticking on that. And then there are Office Max and other places out there that can still do it. You can walk in and do that. The social distancing still applies. They'll be happy to fax it to that number, but the barcode is crucial to make sure you do it all in one fax. If you can imagine, if you had 5 or 6 1099s and you lose 3 of them, they're going to be searching through the system to try and match up by either social security number now or name. And the likelihood of that happening is going to go to a different department where some guys might probably delay the process.
Bottom of the pile.
Hey,
all right.
I'm gonna pop in here for 1 second with a Zoom tip. If you guys go down to where you're adding your chat things, there's 3 little dots. And if you click on that, there's a place to save the chat. So with all these tips and things that are going in there, it will save to our account, but you can save it to yourself. at the end of this call. So just, we'll
Great tip.
probably mention that as well, but just so you know, you can save all this tremendous information.
Great idea. Yeah, with all these links. Okay, moving on. My business is structured as a single member LLC, and I'm wondering if I will be eligible for unemployment compensation under CARES.
You will be eligible. LLCs are eligible, self-employed are eligible. If it's considered a business as a sole proprietor, you can be an LLC and can be still a sole proprietor because you filled out a form with your accountant that says you're a sole proprietor, so they are all eligible.
Great news for that person, hopefully. All right, let's see, simple calculator. So I'm just going to look at the ones Carrie sent me. I applied, but my potential estimated benefit, this is another one we're mostly all in this same boat. My potential estimated benefit says 0. Did I do something wrong or they're still processing? I'm just going to answer this quickly and you can correct me with anything. All that means is that you're in the system. Great. You probably didn't make enough through W-2s in your base period, which if you're applying now is 2019. If you applied a few weeks ago, it's the last quarter 2018 and the first 3 quarters of 2019. So if you did fill out the self-employed segment correctly, as far as you know, and you compiled all your 1099 income under self-employed, then just sit tight. If you did what I did wrong, part of why I'm hosting this is I learned a lot by doing a lot of things wrong. So if you did it wrong, then I encourage you to get that form, fill it out, put all your income as a self-employed and fax it in. Any corrections on that, Patrick? Or
nope, you're spot on. In the actual instructions, you'll see there, if you receive that message, right, don't panic. It goes to a different department. They go down to the self-employment side of the equation, and then they go back in and figure out how they can make an allocation. So that's not a panic situation at that particular point in time. Just wait. And again, if you don't hear anything for a while or whatever, go back in again and make sure that they got it and reapply if you have to. But those are the situations. So the instruction specifically on deed says, if you get down to this level, because of the self-employment is new, they're shuffling that application to a different location or a different department to move on that. So don't panic. You're not out. You're not totally disqualified at that point.
Yep. And I forget if this was already covered, but I can't stress this enough. Once you're in the system, please do your weekly filing, claiming your benefit for that week, because if you miss a week, you will probably never see that money. You can't undo it. If you don't report each week, whenever you are qualified, any week you didn't report, there's basically no way to get that. So please check in every week, claim your $0, because eventually that $0 will be 600 or more. And we'll talk about that a little later, how we think they might be calculating the benefit for those of us who are self-employed, but we don't really have definitive answers yet on that, but we'll get to that. I'm already getting, oh, this one was repeated, the deed. Oh, I'm already getting some UI for a part-time job. So then they're probably a W-2 job, because I don't think anyone's getting UI for a 1099 job. How do I add my 1099 and Schedule E income? I think we already went through all that. You add it by faxing in that form.
Yeah, correct.
Oh, okay.
And part-time are eligible. So
Yep. So it says there's nowhere on the deed website to do that, but you have to go into unemployment when you can log into your account. The times that you're not available to log in, you're not going to be able to find it. And again, if it's been a few weeks, it should be in the mail on its way to you soon if you want to wait for the hard copy. Otherwise, it's kind of complicated to find it. And I wish I had kind of memorized all the 6 buttons you have to do to find it, but just click on everything in your account at the bottom of the page that tells you how your benefit was calculated and sort of why you ended up at 0. At the bottom of that page, it will say correction form, wage and employer correction form.
And just to repeat, there's a misconception out there that you can go in anytime you want to. There are specific times based on your name.
And then someone says, I had a request for my 1099 proof, but not all. What's the link again? So I think they're just asking, I think just what I explained is there isn't a direct link to that, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would have provided it. You just have to log into your account on the days that you're available to do that. And I think Sunday might be a day. I think people should be able to go in today. Then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is designated based on your social. And then Thursday and Friday, again, everybody can log in. And then Saturday, it's the system's just down. So go in when they're open from like 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
And I believe the website has, the first thing they talk about is the calling schedule based on social security number. If your social security number ends in this amount from that standpoint, it's right out in front of you. So,
yep. So now applying and calling and claiming benefits are all based on a day of the week. You can do it that way. The system doesn't crash every Monday when everyone thinks it's time to do it. It doesn't matter if you if you claim on Thursday versus Sunday, it doesn't affect your weekly benefits. So don't be stressed about when you get that. Just do it when it's open to you. And if you miss your day, just do it on Thursday or Friday. So I don't think we have any more questions about UI, and maybe we'll move on to the loans.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions.
Let's talk a little bit about, again, for those of us either who have a small W-2 amount and are hoping our 1099 will qualify, or for those of us who are only going to qualify as self-employed. Now we know that it sounds like we're all going to get this $600 a week. What is your current understanding of how they might be calculating what else we're going to get in addition to the 600 based on our 1099s?
So we think based on that, because there's some guidance coming out, but we think they may do an average. So they'll look at an average annual income average and average that out over 12 months. That's the way they're qualifying a lot of the loans that I'll get into after this, on how they're qualifying what the size of the loan amount is. They're doing something similar on the unemployment side and saying, we know that 1099 clients might get 10 in January and none for the next 4 or 5 months. So they have to come up with some type of amortization over that period of time, average it out over that period. So they may go back and look at your annual income for 2018 and say, yep, that was consistent with what is happening from that standpoint. Or look at, you have your 2019 filed at this particular point already. They can look at that, yep, that was an average on that particular amount. So they don't want to kick everybody out if you don't have it in February, or you don't have it from your last paycheck or your last quarter, like it would for regular unemployment. You got to come up with something different. And we really haven't received any real format that they're going down that line to determine that at this point in time. It'll actually say out on the deed website, it's coming. They're waiting for guidance also. So as soon as we hear that, we'll put the broadcast out onto everybody, and I'll get a hold of you guys as I'll put you on my mailing list now. For you, Catherine, and whatever. So as we hear different updates, I have a big broadcast that goes out on changes. We talk to Deed on a regular basis, on a daily basis, so we kind of get information. And if you look at the news, it's all national news, so you don't see really a lot of state news that comes in on websites saying this is how you apply for self-employed individuals to make sure you can. So
yeah, and I guess at this point I'll recommend people to know in film and television Facebook page, because I know that's one place that if I get an update that's like, oh, you guys, this is how determined it, or this is when the money's coming, probably that'll be the first place I post it, just to reach our membership. So if you're not a member and you want to just follow our page, that'd be a good place to get these updates. So we can move on to the SBA disaster assistance in response to the coronavirus loans. And those are the economic injury disaster loan and the potential advance that some people were able to qualify for that. And we'll refer to that as EIDL, and then also the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP.
Okay, I will start with EIDL. So, and I'll just tell you that what's happening at the legislature right now is there's a bill pending for an additional $250 billion that the Democrats and Republicans are fighting about. They're meeting twice a week if there's ability to vote on something. The dispute on the $250 billion was that they don't want to put it all back into the big banking system again on any money, on PP especially, and the EIDL. However, in this particular bill, what we've seen so far, which will be there, is that they will reopen both programs. So the EIDL program will open back up. There'll be a different allocation of funding on that, and there also will be funding for the PPP loans. However, the PPP loans they think will do different. I'll get to that coming up, but I'll talk about the EIDL loan first. So this was a different loan than we're used to seeing from the SBA. These are disaster loans. They're considered disaster loans, and we don't have a lot of floods here in Minnesota, so you haven't seen this program before. Down south, they have it all the time. This is a program that is directly funded from the SBA. You don't need to go to a bank. You don't need to talk to anybody about it. You don't need to go anyplace else but sba.gov. And the link is out there. I saw that Catherine and folks put it out there already. Yep. So that right now is not taking applications, but when the money gets allocated, it could be a week or two, but you want to keep your ears open. That is a good program, and I'll tell you the nuances of this program. This program has a top cap on it of $2 million. So lots of people think it's $10,000. They heard about this grant. They heard about all these other things. This is that program that is really a disaster emergency loan from the SBA. The funds are sent directly from the SBA to your account. Two unique things about this program that start out, they get people confused right out of the gate. One is it doesn't ask you for amount, right? And it doesn't tell you the term. So this is if you think about it from a normal loan, if you went into your car dealership or you'd happen to go land in a commercial loan in your lifetime, the first thing out of their mouth is, how much money do you need? So people get confused about that. That's not how this program gets set up. What they do is they're taking enough information to make a qualified decision. And this particular program is based on credit score. And it's talking about looking at your last 12 months of income. And what they do is they average that out, and whatever that is, they take 50% of that, and that's supposed to be equal to very similar, about 8 to 10 weeks of expense money that you can have. The EIDL program application goes through the SBA. You go out to their website, you can see it out there. It'll say disaster loan. A lot of people early on in this program had difficulty. They got frustrated with it because the SBA didn't have it really set up well. It didn't perform well. It got clogged up and did all these things. Right now, the program is very streamlined. You go out there, you don't have to provide tax returns. It doesn't ask you for all of these other forms on the situation. It doesn't ask you for this debt schedule they asked, all of these different things. And it's really good for self-employed people to go in there and look at it. If you have income and you can verify the income that you've had from previous years, you're going to get approved if you have a pretty good credit score. So as you go through this process, they'll come out and they'll ask you for eligibility questions first. And you'll know if you're on the right side because the first question that is asked in that application, you can write this down, is, are you a business under 500 employees? And if you're a self-employed, you are putting 1 down, uno, right? So at that point, and it steps to the next thing and then asks you eligibility questions. There's about 8 to 10 questions. It asks if you're a convicted felon, asks all these other questions that SBA has for requirement on that. That set of boxes, you just check no, 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 all the way down, check the boxes. And then you'll know you're right in the right spot because the next question is going to say, what is the name of your business? And from that point, it'll take you about 30 minutes. The way this program works is it has maturities up to 30 years. So big real estate people that are applying for this can go up to 30 years. We're seeing average terms between 5 and 7 years on other loans. It has a 3.5% interest rate. This is no forgivable debt, only for one piece of that. And I'll get to that in a second. They're also, if you have a LLC and you're filing under an LLC, they're going to put a lien against your LLC in this program. All right. If you have a house and you own a house, they're going to put a lien against the house. That's an automatic situation in there. If it's under $25,000, no liens, no collateral necessary. That's a little tip that the people are going through the process. At that particular point, you go through the application, you submit it in. At the end of the application, it's going to ask you if you want an advance. There's a little box you check and it says, here's an advance. And the way the advance is calculated is that for every employee you have, you get $1,000. And within 6 business days, they're going to wire you money. And again, based on the stimulus checks, you need to put in your routing transit number and your account number and your bank information to get that check wired directly to your account. They started out with 3 days. They're now at 6. If the new program comes out, they may do it quicker. I doubt it. This guideline now is the one that's working. They love it. They think it's great. At that particular point, you're going to get that advance check. At the time you get the advance check, then there's going to be a process, minimum of 21 days filing time from the time you get the application in. Then it's another 4 days to process the check and then closing documents. So you can pretty much predict it's going to be at least 30 days to 45 days before you get an answer. Those of you who have already applied for this are waiting for it. If it hasn't been 30 days, don't panic. If you got an application number, you're in the queue. Most likely you're going to get money. They're going through these applications and they took enough applications to get them up to their maximum, and then they shut it off. So this is not like the paycheck, land rush deal that we'll talk about in a minute or two. So at that particular point, you should get the check. If you get the check, that means for sure they got your application. Then they're going to come back to you with an approval process. If they come back and they deny your loan and they say, I'm sorry, Patrick, you're not good enough for us today, even though you need the money, right? You can keep the draw. Okay, now here's the difference though. If you keep the draw and now you get the SBA loan, when they give you the money for the SBA loan, you're going to be short that $1,000. They're going to take it out of your net proceeds on the sale. So all of us that get approved, we don't get the grant. They set the grant up for the people who applied. So if they get denied, they're still going to get a little bit of a check and some money on the deal. If you have 4 or 5 employees and you put it in there, a couple of things we don't know how they're verifying employees. We think they're going through the tax return and saying, okay, how many do you have on your federal tax return? If you have a part-time person, does that qualify or not? I think it does qualifies as an employee. So you know for sure you're going to get $1,000 if you fill out the application, which is now taking, verified through several hundred people I've dealt with, less than 30 minutes. So for 30 minutes, you get $1,000.
I'm going to say 6 minutes. It's really like a page. I couldn't believe how streamlined they've done it.
Yep.
It's
so
really
at that
a
particular
page.
point, and they're going to give you the draw. It looks like if you got a good credit score, a fair credit score. When I say fair credit score, SBA and their normal loan environments look for a 620 or above on your credit score. So if you're above that, I would apply. If you're at 500, on some of their programs, they drop it down to a lower level, especially if you're a sole proprietor. At that particular point, everybody knows that you always put all your personal stuff and put it into the deal. So as a sole proprietor, self-employed, you go through that process. Now, that's the really easy one to get some good money out of it quick. From the standpoint, 6 days, you'll get $1,000 for an individual side of the equation. That works out really well. I would recommend everybody apply for it. If this opens back up, go get the money. Apply for it. It won't take you long. Don't give yourself the option of saying, no, I'm not going to apply for it. If you run into a problem finding the right website, the right web page, you can email me. I'll walk you through
Carrie's
it.
already posted it. That is the website where you apply.
Yep.
So
And that should
pull it
get
up
you
right
right
now
there.
and fill it out as soon as you
Yep.
get off here.
Yeah, if they probably won't take your application today because I think they said that they got a ruling. They shut it
check
off.
every day.
Don't accept it. But you'll hear about this in the media. We are looking for the next stimulus contribution, and everybody's trying to get it. All the legislatures trying to get it in the payroll paycheck, but we're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to open up the EIDL again for a certain amount of money. We're also going to put some money into the paycheck loan. But we're also going to put it into the hands of a lot of nonprofit organizations and some small banks that will have the ability to go out and get the money to the people that really are needing it in the trenches. So we're hoping that happens. That's why it's been turned down 3 or 4 times now. We think that when they reconvene here over the next week or so that it'll go through. There's going to be a program. We're pretty confident. It's just a matter of getting to where the money would go. On the first round, it went to a lot of big corporate sponsors. Hotels were getting $50 million at a track. So it wasn't getting down to the level that we wanted to. Minnesota fared very well. I can tell you, we know these programs pretty well. Of all the applications that we assisted people with, we feel we had about 90% success ratio. So that was pretty high based on the state only getting 60% of their total businesses approved for the program. So if there's any questions on the EIDL program, I'll take those first, and then I'll move on to the paycheck loan.
Okay, so first I'll say, because I also applied for EIDL, I did not receive any email confirmation, and I have not received a response, but you told me because I applied almost 3 weeks ago, I applied right in that window where they just made it super easy and included the button for the $1,000 advance forgivable free money for each employee. Yep. When you finish it, they give you a number. I just fortunately saved that number, even because you think, well, they're going to email me a response that I applied and with that number. They never did. So I kept that number. There's an 800 number on the SBA website. I called. They just said, we have no way to look anything up by that number. Keep that number. The fact that you have that number means you're in the system and you will eventually get this advance. So just when you get a chance to apply again, make sure you keep some kind of record of the number they give you, because I don't think they're giving any confirmation, which then also kind of answers, someone had asked, I applied for an EIDL, didn't understand the cost of services question, answered $0 as they're a way to adjust it. There's no way to adjust it at this point, but maybe when it comes time, if you do qualify for the loan and they want to talk to you about the terms and the amount, that's when you would let them know that you had additional expenses.
Yep. So let me add on that comment. So in reality sense of the word with this EIDL loan is when you applied. So if you applied early for this program, it was really hosed up. And a lot of people did not get the application number. So that number we're talking about is crucially important. If you got that number, they actually accepted your application. If you didn't get that number, you will need to reapply. I wish I could have got to you earlier, because at that particular point in time, we were telling people when they didn't get that number to go back in and reapply and reapply and reapply until they actually got a number. Same type of thing. The system was backlogged. It blew up on them. They came through another process after that said they were going to put all the documents into a Dropbox. Again, should have got an application number. If you didn't have the application number, your application is not in the system. It's not there. So when this thing reopens up again, reapply. There are no rules to say that if you wait 20 days or 15 or days along that line and you get frustrated, you can go in and apply again. And if they give you another application number, they'll match it up. Trust me, they'll find those because they'll cross-reference them. Better safe than sorry. If you think something's going on and it goes out longer than the period of time, they may not have got into the queue. I don't think so. Based on what we're hearing, everybody that got an application number, they were looking at the amount saying that they allocated an average loan amount. And again, if you do have the application number, the worst case scenario is you're going to get the draw if you applied for the draw. Another problem we had originally on that is the draw in the streamlined process is right in front of you. It says check the box. And the old system, when they first started, you could apply for the EIDL and forget to check the box, and it wouldn't take you to the screen to get the draw request. So you may not have been eligible for the draw request, but you're still going to get the loan, the EIDL loan. They'll tell you whether you've been denied or approved at that point in time. So it's fairly complicated, but moving on. The minute this thing's open up, go for it.
Okay, so some questions about the terms of it. Is the EIDL forgivable? What are they talking about for interest rates and the terms of like when this would be paid back, and how many months is your first payment postponed?
Sure. So the deferment on this particular loan, which has some unique advantages, which I'll go through those. The difference between this loan and the PPP loan is, one is in this loan, there is no forgivable debt other than the draw request if you get denied. The rate is 3.5%. Okay, so they're going to charge you 3.5%. And based on the amount of money and based on what type of business, you don't have real estate or collateral. And again, remember, under $25,000, there is no collateral. So if you get the small amount, and you guys are probably applying for some smaller amounts, it's under 25, you got nothing to worry about at that particular point. They're not going to take collateral. There's no personal guarantee on it from that standpoint. They'll have you sign the documents, away you go. Again, there is no forgivable debt in that other than the draw request. Now, the terms are dictated normally what we believe is by the dollar amount. So real estate, commercial loans that a person has, they would pay, and you applied for that because you owned your own building and can be as high as 30 years. We're not seeing anything less than 5 years. So 60 months is the term on short-term debt. So if you borrowed and you got $50,000 on it, it's probably going to be over a 5-year amortization payments, and you're going to go through that place. You pay them 3.5%, which is a really good interest rate. Here's one of the key differences you have to take into account, because people will apply for both of these. Under the EIDL loan, you can use that money for all kinds of expenses that your business occurs. You can use it to pay lease payments. You can use it to pay inventory. You can use it to pay other debts. If you have other debts off, you can use the payments to pay that. There's no restriction in this particular loan as long as the expenses are for the business. We look at this and say a lot of people at 3.5% interest, if this went out 7 years and to have a payment of $300 or $400 is a lot cheaper than trying to go through the PPM process and better put it in expenses and then have to balloon in 2 years, which I'll get to. So again, there is no forgiveness in this other than the draw period. The average term, the minimum term we're seeing is 5 years. The maximum term is 3.5% interest rate. You get 11 months deferral on this one. So the 11 months is key. You're not making a payment on this loan for 11 months. That's different from the paycheck loan. So from this standpoint, there are some advantages. Now, if you apply for this loan and you got the paycheck loan, because there's some people out there that got that, right? You're still going to probably get a response on the EIDL loan. They don't automatically cancel that loan if you got the paycheck loan. If you applied for the EIDL first and the paycheck loan, your EIDL loan could come back at a higher dollar amount. When that happens, you would notify the IRS when they ask you for the closing. I also have a paycheck loan, and they would deduct the paycheck loan from the EIDL loan, and you can have both loans. So you can still have both. There's a lot of media out there that's bad press that the media grabbed a hold of earlier that didn't get really what the requirements were and said, if you got one, you can't have the other one, or you can't apply for it. Second thing is, when we get into this PP loan, we'll give you some tips on how to get that into a queue a little better than some of the ways that are happening out there with the big banks. So if you need any more information on it, be happy to send it out, but keep your eye open on this. Again, when in doubt, apply. You never know what's going to happen. We have had people that were absolutely amazed that said there's no way they were ever going to get money, and they got approved for it. So go apply. You can always turn it down. That's the one thing that you can do with any of these loans. They can say you're approved for it, and you can say, hey, I don't want it. Although we're not seeing a lot of that. Most people are so.
All right, on that note, let's move on to PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, also under the SBA. Oh, is there another question?
Catherine, yeah, there was. So what if, what this one person asked, what if I didn't ask for an advance?
Oh, I think we covered.
Okay, so if you didn't ask for the advance, you're not have the ability to go back in, but you could reapply if it opens back up and check the box for an advance. And actually, you could go into the SBA, but they've got it shut down, so you can't. So at this particular point, what's going to happen is you're probably going to get approved for the EIDL loan without the advance, and that's probably going to take you 30 days to get notice on it at that particular point. We have no way of actually going in there to change the terms on the loan at this particular point because that site is shut down for the EIDL loan. So you're going to have to just grin and bear it, and hopefully you get approved, and the advance amount they were going to give you is in there. So unfortunately, we don't have recourse now to figure out how to go back in and get the advance if you didn't apply for it.
Yeah. Okay, and then someone asked, can you apply now even though there is no money? But all three of these programs are currently not accepting new applications.
So the EIDL program, because it goes direct to the SBA, they've got the site shut down, so it'll give you a message that says the loan program's no longer there. The PPP program, though, is different, and I'll get to that. So that's a different program.
Yep,
so
that's a good point.
At that particular point, you will hear in the media that this bill got passed. You need to check that website, and the minute it opens up, get your application in there because it's first come, first served basis on that program along with the PPP loan. So.
Yeah, so let's talk about how we can, those of us who didn't apply for PPP yet or didn't get accepted and the money ran out, how we get into the PPP system for when it opens up again.
Yep. So I'm fortunate they named that program after me. The SBA came to me and asked me, the Patrick Pariseau plan. Yeah, nobody's clapping.
How do you do that? I don't see the clap button.
So anyway, so this program is designed specifically to keep people working and actually have a payment based on your income and your payroll and going through the process. They realized early that they wanted to include gig employees, self-employed employees, self-employed owners, proprietaries. So everybody pretty much qualifies for this business. So if you got a sole proprietor, self-employed, you qualify for it. What they did not understand was how fast this money was going to go through the process and how fast it had to go through it. Now, if you remember the EIDL program, I mentioned to you that this money comes directly from the SBA. Huge misconception on the PPP program. There was $352 billion that was put into the PPP program, but SBA put it in as a guarantee. So the SBA is guaranteeing that loan 100%. So they really didn't have and disperse the cash out to the banks. The actual bank, who was the entity that was an agent for the SBA, started doing these loans. They had to put their money into the program. They put their money in, they get 100% guarantee on it. They pick up some fees that the SBA pays. So it was attractive for them to do it. They get a 1% interest rate on it. So they said, hey, fine. And then the federal government came back and said, hey, to make it really attractive for the banks, because most banks can't live off a 1% interest, they will buy back the loan from the bank at that point. So they could put a lot of money into it. So they went through that process. A lot of institutions, credit unions, for example, don't have commercial lending. They don't qualify it. They had to be an SBA authorized delegated authority lender to be able to offer these types of loans. So you had to find a bank to go to first off to go get it. Big banks jumped into it right away. They had banks that had 500,000 applications. Wells Fargo said they had over 500,000 people apply. JP Morgan Chase, the same thing. What happened was there was a big amount of confusion. The only way you know if you're approved from a paycheck payroll loan is the fact that the bank said the SBA approved it and they gave you an authorization number. What the banks were doing is they were putting you into a queue. And if you notice, they had the application you filled out, but they didn't ask you for your payroll information. They would get back to you. So you could have been 499,000 in that queue and not got an SBA loan. Because if you look at the state of Minnesota, they only approved of all the banking financial banks that were taking applications for the state, 32,000 applications. So if you were a US bank and they had 50,000 applications in the first 4 hours and you were at that bank, the likelihood of you getting approved was probably not good, but they didn't tell you that. They said, hey, we'll take your application, we'll look at it. In the instructions, it said, hey, we really only want you to apply for one bank. Now, guess what? I know for a fact, I serve the underserved market. Not everybody's got a bank account at JP Morgan and US Bank. They have accounts at credit unions. They have bank accounts at other folks. They may not even have a bank account. They may use their debit card. So all of those folks didn't have a chance because they took on their clients first. So that puts you way back in the queue and you didn't have an opportunity. So moving ahead, they're trying to make the changes on that. So now this program is a 1% interest rate for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, this balloons, this payment comes up. Now this is forgivable debt, but here's where we have to be really careful. When we do this loan, we have to look at our payroll and say for forgivable debt, 2 years from now, and it's any time after the 7th week of this program, that you can go in and get forgivable debt. So if you have exactly the same payroll on today's date when you applied, when you sent your information in, which is February, is the month they're doing it, but I'm going to tell you how self-employed works here in a second. You would then make sure that at the end of the term, after 7 weeks, between then and 2 years, if you were at the same level of payroll, you would be able to get a refund, forgivable debt for that entire loan amount. 25% of that loan can be used for interest payments on a mortgage, from the standpoint of that, utilities from that standpoint. So remember the EIDL loan, that you can use it for anything. There is restrictions on the PP of what expenses you can actually allocate those dollars for other than payroll. Very limited from that standpoint. And we expect the banks that when they come back and you ask for your forgivable debt, you better have very accurate bookkeeping records to prove that the payroll you had is the same at that particular point. So you do not want to commingle this and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to pay my rent payment and I'm going to pay a couple of other things and I'm going to pay my couple other expenses I had and buy some inventory or going to do something else with the money. And then by the time I get back on my payroll, I'll let them know. They're going to make you itemize that payroll at some point for that forgivable debt. So be careful there. Make sure you're not cheating a little bit on that program. Because they're going to look for an excuse to make you pay that loan back over that period of time. At the end of the term of 2 years, you can extend it for another 36 months. At that point, we don't know what the interest rates will be. We think they'll continue with the 1%, but they have an option in their contract to say that they could change the rate. They think it's going to be 3 or 4%, but that's the way it's going to read. So, all to self-employed. So on April 10th, a separate application came out that said self-employed independent contractors fill out the application, and there's a formula in there that tells you how much payroll you really have, or because you're self-employed. It asks you for this average. 12 months, divided by that, they take what your average was over that period, multiply it times the 2.5% interest, and that's your check. So based on that, so in 2019, if you have an average income or the first 3 quarters or the first 3 months of the year, going back to February, and that was your average, you can use that amount, or you can obviously go back to the average to figure out the calculation if you're a sole proprietor, single, self-employed. So that program is really got, before you guys could even think about applying for that on April 10th, I can tell you that if you apply it at a big bank, most likely you're not going to get that. Now, the key when this thing opens up is have all your information ready to go. If you're already applied at the bank, you want to leave that application in. I'm saying if it's Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, all of these US Bank, all of these great big banks, and you applied after April 10th, most likely you're in their queue, and by the time they get to you, probably the money's going to be out again. So we're hoping that they'll be able to put some money into the CDFI, community development. You'll be able to have that opportunity. I would apply multiple bank places. I would go to a small bank. I would go to a small credit union that has it. I would apply there. And the application says you can't apply and have SBA approve you more than once. They don't like that, right? So whoever comes to the show first, right?
Take it.
A little artist humor show, you know.
Yeah.
No clapping again. Jeez,
Oh,
I'm bombing today, baby.
Well, we have everyone muted, so there we go. There we go.
That's okay. Everybody's muted. So
okay, we have a
anyway,
good question that really is about this. Then, if you want me to go into the questions.
Go ahead.
So this person was approved for the PPP. There's some applause through a small bank because they were smart enough to do that. Who's does someone want to wave and show me that it was Rebecca? Okay. She was approved for the PPP through a small bank. She plans to pay herself payroll 2 times her monthly average salary based on her 2019. Her understanding is that payroll expenses are forgivable. Is this correct? Which we just said, as long as you're doing at least 75%. And the way I'm breaking it down, when will this need to be paid out to myself by? Would paying my rent to my business studio be forgivable? And again, that would be that 25% could
correct.
go towards rent.
Yep.
And then another even more specific one. Who did this? I received a PPP loan. About 54 different employees you have. Who did that come in from? Lacey, okay. So Lacey received the loan. The only thing she needed to provide was to determine the amounts was all the 1099s she paid out through her business, which is an LLC, paid out over 54 1099s. With the amount she received, can she keep 5 to 10 of her regular crew afloat as opposed to spreading it out over all 54 people and not being so effective? Is this going to affect if the loan will be forgivable? Also, do I need to make sure that the crew that I do pay with the PP loan have not received their own PPP loans?
That's a great question, and that's a good one because that gets a little bit more difficult, but here's the situation. The answer to your first question is, can you keep your employees going at that particular point in time? Yes. The question is, did you claim the 1099 employees or your independent contracting employees at the time you applied for the PPP loan? If you included that total amount in the payroll, right, they're looking at the payroll amount on an average per month. So for you to get the full credit of the 100%, if you said, I'm going to stretch this out for only 5 employees, but I had on my roster technically 25 employees, they're going to say, well, you laid those folks off. That portion of the income does not, or the payroll does not count. So you're only going to get credit for the 5 employees. Now, remember this, and I'm going to say this without any request. Everybody's putting the emphasis on the forgivable debt. If you are businesses in trouble and you want to do exactly what you're saying in this particular situation, do it. It's a 1% loan.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't worry about that at that point in time. Yes, you can get some forgivable debt. This would be great. It would happen to everybody, but we don't know how long this is going to last. And if those are valuable employees to you, the 1099 guys you can recontract, plus they could apply themselves. It's really cumbersome at that level because they are self-employed also as independent contractors. So if you need to go there, go for it, right? I would just continue to pay them. You're still going to get some forgivable debt for the 5 employees for that period of time, and you can have up to 2 years to get back. So at some point between now and that 2 years, you hire all of those contractors back, and in one of those months before you go, before the end of the 2 years, and they're all on the payroll again, and you have the same roster or close to the same roster, you're going to get the forgivable debt at that point. So the only restriction we see on the forgivable debt is it can start at the 7-week mark. So here's where the system got abused. I have a law firm, right? And I have 20 employees, attorneys that are still working. I don't really need the money because they're all working. I'm going to pay them anyway. So I hit the 7 weeks. I turn this back into, you just made an equity injection into my company for $2.7 million, and it's free money. For all of us that have to make a living and are in the trenches working, remember, it's a 1% interest. There's no personal guarantee on this loan. There is no collateral on this loan. That's different from the EIDL program. So at that point, you have really no risk into the business side of that equation other than paying the 1% and the principal payment back. So that's a heck of a deal. So if you need the money to survive, I'm not worried about getting the forgivable debt. I'm going to take the 1% interest. I'll renew it at the end of 2 years if I don't qualify for that and take the money. That's a great deal from that standpoint. Got out of a bad situation and we're back on our feet. So that's two things that my advice is. Yes, but if you know you're going to at some point get back on your feet and you're going to have that payroll with that same amount at some future point, and you claimed them on the PPP organization, so you got a big chunk of dough for claiming the other 55 employees, that's great. But don't worry about it from the standpoint if you run into a problem that you can't pay it back today. You have up to 2 years to make that forgivable debt work.
Then the employees that you're paying can be 1099 or W-2 employees that you can put on payroll.
Yep, you can
Yep.
add those into the payroll. You have to prove it to the bank. That's the paperwork you need to get ready now before you apply. Make sure that's available to you. Now, if you're in a queue at another bank, you're going to leave yourself there. But when this thing comes back up and you got the notice that you didn't get in their queue right away or whatever, then it's a horse race, right? Go out to a couple of different races. Make sure you go to a couple of small banks, medium-sized banks. I know that Sunrise Bank here has been accepting applications from every Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union was accepting applications. There's different places around there. We really got loans approved to smaller organizations, just to tell you how it worked. On Wednesday morning, we had people that were waiting in line at Wells Fargo for 10 days and hadn't heard a word back from Wells Fargo. We applied them to another bank, smaller bank, and they got approved for their loan that night before it cut off. So being active and making sure you're going out and finding the smaller places or they're going through that whole deal. You know, we were telling people go apply for 2 or 3 places. And again, we had great success at getting people through from the standpoint that they knew us. We knew we referred them from Meda from that standpoint. So it worked out pretty well. So.
Okay, and before we wrap up the PPP, there are just some people have questions about, oh, and someone else just put another one, about if you're qualified for the PP, you're putting yourself on payroll, obviously you do not qualify for unemployment during those weeks. And then once you've run out of or exhausted your PPP, you can go on unemployment, but you need to decide which one works better for you. Don't try to get away with getting both.
Yep. So that's a big question. And here's what happens is what's happening in the labor force is a lot of people have applied for the unemployment. If they look at the unemployment plus the 600 a week, you might not want to come back to work for you. And you have to make the decision yourself is, do you really want them to come back to work or stay on unemployment? So on the PPP loan, if you're a sole proprietor, independent contractor, and there's enough money, let's say I'm a 2-person company and I took out $100,000 each, at 2.5 times, that's $450,000. You can pay yourself for the period of time. Remember, it's annual though. You got to divide it up, and then so it wouldn't be that much. But that's attractive from that standpoint because of the interest rate and going down that line. However, you do have that process of saying they look at it and say with immediate hire or keep them on staff. Now, you may have employees that you want to hire back immediately, but you have to make the decision: are they going to be part-time? Or are they going to be in that situation? And do you really want to hire them back with the idea that they're going to have to go back and reapply for unemployment for the 8 weeks which the money's going through? Or do you just leave them there from that standpoint and say, okay, I'm going to use the money for myself and I'll use it over the 8-week period or whatever that is to go through that process. And guess what? I'll go back and get my 100% forgivable debt. So those are decisions you need to make yourself in that side of the equation. It's getting more and more difficult. We're seeing a lot of non-documented people that work for restaurants and places going home. They're leaving the country because they can't get unemployment because they don't qualify because they're not documented. So the labor force could suffer a really difficult time of rehiring employees. And if you notice, some of that is already being prepared. Some of the big franchise places like McDonald's and some other places are already amping up the wages when they come back, because there's going to probably be a shortage in the labor force. Because if I could get an extension for 13 weeks and I'm making 400 plus 600 at 1,000 a month, do I really want to come back and work for my employer who's going to pay me half of that? And plus I get benefits under the unemployment. I get my benefits paid. So you might see a lot of people working. It might be favorable for your employees to come back at that time. There's rumors out there flying that people are just going to pay them cash and let them collect unemployment, but I can't say that because that's illegal. So you go through that process and say, okay, they're part-time workers. I might be able to get around that from that standpoint. So those are the hurdles that you face when this thing comes through the door. A lot of people said, and again, you can apply for the PPP loan, but you don't have to take it. Remember, so if you get to that point and you say, hey, guess what? This is what's happening to me. I can't get these employees back and I can't run for the payroll. You can say, I don't want to take it. Or you get a response from the EIDL loan and it's more than what the response for a PP. You can say, oh, I want the EIDL loan, but I would take the 1% and the forgivable debt. And if at least I get a portion of it forgivable, it makes sense to me because it's free money at that point in time.
Yeah.
Make sure you keep your book solid at that point. Make sure you're tracking that, because some way along the way, the IRS, the SBA, and the state government have a way of coming back and saying, yeah, we thought we were going to say that, but we decided that you need to put this up and tell us how that worked.
Yeah, it's really recommended that if you qualify for PPP through your small bank or through a bank, then set up your payroll through that bank if they offer that, so that it'll all be kept track of in one place.
Yep.
You can go, look, I did it exactly right. 75% went to payroll, and here's all the proof.
There it is. Yep.
And
so
we do
again,
have a,
and it's a great program. So I recommend people, and again, it's one of those deals. If it comes available, go to 2 or 3 different places. Don't let anybody tell you differently. That's all smoke and mirrors here. They just didn't want to have people applying in multiple places and getting paid twice. That's going to happen, but they have the system to be able to do that. That money is going to go really fast. So back to our earlier question, you can't apply for the EIDL loan, but you can go out because banks are still taking applications. So you might want to get in their queue today or on Monday and start filling out the paperwork if you haven't, or if you bought one of those great big banks and you were back after April 10th, I would not question 1 second. I would go find some other smaller operations that would be able to take your application. They take them online. You can get it out there and they'll start lining up, because these smaller community banks have got the system down now. They figured it out. They can get their money back and they can make a little money and they can help their folks that are in their lending pool, but also help other people from that, because the money tap is on. You can go borrow this money really cheap.
and is there a list? Is there a list online? If we go to that link for PPP, do they still have sort of a geographic list where you can go, where are these lenders? And you'll see US Bank and you'll see Wells Fargo, but some of these little banks you should be able to find, and look out state,
Yep. So you can look out state. There's all kinds of different lenders. I would look for non-banks. Credit unions are good that are out there. I know Firefly, Affinity, some of these guys who do commercial lendings are on there. You'll see the application out there saying they're still taking applications. There's some independent lenders out there that are finance companies. People are staying away from them, but they can still offer the loan. And guess what? They have to comply with the SBA. So the interest rate's not going to be higher. It's those types of things from that standpoint. There are some FinCEN lenders out there. Be careful with those guys. Make sure you're getting what you're paying for, because a lot of fraud out there. There's been guys, they're charging 90% interest and said they're part of the SBA government. So,
oh my gosh, should we talk to our bookies to see if they can?
Yeah, exactly. So make sure it says SBA.gov or authorized lender. And you can go out to that list and you can look for any SBA authorized lender in the state of Minnesota. There's hundreds and hundreds of lenders.
Yeah.
So you can go out. Yep. So you can go out to the suburbs, you can go out rural, you can go to different places and look at it from that standpoint. So
okay, and Carrie just posted again, so to make it easy for you, there's your link for the Paycheck Protection Program. Poke around on there. I don't know how much the site is down now that it's not available, but they might still have that geographic map where you can say 100 miles.
Yeah, actually you can go to sba.gov, right, and click on lenders. There's a lender page out there that says click on lenders, and you can go to the state and it'll list every one of them that has SBA authority within the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, insider secrets. Love it. I'm going to tap it in now.
There's actually a page out there that say find a lender. You can click on that and you type in Minnesota and it gives you all of them.
We'll share a little, someone just shared their personal story that really speaks to why these loans are so useful for small business people, because it is historically nearly impossible for us to qualify for loans regularly. This person applied for a loan at the bank of 40 years, US Bank, also my bank of 40 years. I also applied at US Bank and got no answer, but I did for the PPP. I'm assuming this was just, they applied for just a loan for their situation, not necessarily an SBA loan. It's been an unbelievably difficult process as a freelancer, especially because my income's been down for the last couple of years. They're asking me to prepay my car lease. I've heard this, $7,500, and I think I know whose message this is. And they keep asking me for more documents. Is it always that hard to just get a loan from a bank?
And the answer is absolutely. So here's where you want to think about this is, Your group, as I can see on the screen here, the title has women in it, right? So you are classified as minorities at this particular point in time. So Women's Venture, ADC, NDC, all of these nonprofit organizations that are called a community development financial institution. California has a great big complement of these CDFI lenders that are in the arts and acting and theater and all of those that are specially designed CDFIs that specialize in folks like yourself to apply for small business loans. So the process normally is that in your case, I would always ask and find for an SBA loan. Okay, you want to go to your bank or whoever your credit union is in your position because you have 1099 income, self-employed. You want to ask for an SBA loan, and what you need to do then is bring your personal income taxes in to show what your revenue is, and they have a debt service calculation in there. But the SBA loans give the bank a guarantee of 85% of the loan if it's under 125,000. So if you can keep your amount of requests under 125,000, odds are pretty good that if you got a pretty good credit score and you can show some income to support the debt, you'll get approved by the SBA on the commercial side. We do those loans periodically. Just got to find the right source. Wells Fargo, US Bank, and some of the great big banks underwrite to the top 10% of all the best clients in the United States. I'll be honest with you, my family comes from a small business. Our family had the same problem for years, so we found the right bank, right? So we established a relationship with it. Credit unions who do commercial lending is a great way to go. If you keep the loan under 25,000, it's an SBA loan, they don't need any collateral. That's a standard rule across the board. If it's less than 25 grand, don't need it. When you get into real estate and you want to buy your building as a commercial loan, you should also look into what they call an SBA 504 program. That's specifically designed for real estate under SBA. That gives you a 30-year loan, right? It's a great opportunity. It's low interest rate. The rate right now on the SBA portion of that loan, it's a little different. They get a loan with the bank. They provide 50% of the money. SBA provides 40%, and you put in 10% equity, as opposed to the 20 or 30 they're probably asking you for on the loan that you were applying for. At that particular point, you get 30-year financing fixed on 40% of that loan. The rate right now on that program is 2.85%. And that's a real estate.
Kelly wants to know, how important is it to become a certified woman-owned business, and is there such a thing?
Okay, so yes. So you have what they call MBEs, okay? So that's minority business enterprise, right? So women are classified in that as woman, WIBE, right?
Okay.
WBE, women business enterprise. What that does for you is, and it's really mainly been set up for many, many years for government contracting. So if you had a government contract, you would get preference in there. So anybody can bid under you by 6%. And because you're a woman minority business owner, 100%, you would get bid preference in there. What's happening in the industry though is places like Target and these great big companies now are dropping down into regional product and appraisal development. In your industry, probably doesn't fit as well, but you might have an opportunity to do training. You might have the opportunity to do different things, or might be other opportunities. So, but it also looks really good on your stationery, because if you're a woman business enterprise, people are looking for hiring people first at that level. Right? So you have MBE, WBE, and down the line. So if you're a business owner and you get an opportunity to bid on some work from that, depending on what the work is, you will get preference in that bid classification by doing that. State of Minnesota has a streamlined program. Women's Venture can tell you how to do that with no problem. We do that also. NASDC is an actual certification organization that does veterans, minority business. If you're a woman of color, I recommend that you go get that, pursue that for sure, because that's a double dip. You're a woman and you're a person of color. So all of those things can get you on your stationery so people know that. You want to make sure you broadcast that or something. So, for example, the Guthrie gets a lot of state of Minnesota dollars. There's a minority spend quota. So for different types of art that comes in, if you're an actor or from that standpoint of that ideal, if you're one of those kinds of deals and they put the contract through you, or if you're a production person and you get the production. My brother-in-law, who does a lot of nonprofit work for special filming and different deals from that standpoint. He gets beat out a lot of times because there is a woman or a person who's doing production comes in and they're a WBE as an enterprise certified development. They have the opportunity to go through that. But I would definitely get it. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost you anything from that standpoint. Some places do charge you, but most of them do not. It looks good on your stationery from that standpoint when you're applying for jobs. You're going to see a massive change over the next 10 years where private organizations are going to have a minority spend. Women will be included in that along with people of color and veterans. So those are huge opportunities for you. I would do them immediately.
Okay, so I'd love to be able to spend this last half hour in our breakout. So I'm just going to very quickly go over the small business. Sorry?
Can I, in fact, I'm going to interrupt you just for one thing,
Sure.
Catherine, because I wrote a note here. And I just want to let you know that make sure, and this is my last bit of advice, you're checked with your city of Minneapolis and the city of St. Paul, because the city of Minneapolis has a grant program for $10,000. It's got select geographical areas in it. They're actually offering it to self-employed also. City of St. Paul also has a program that's a $7,500 grant that has the application to do. But you got to move pretty fast. I think there's some deadlines, and I see somebody's telling me that the city is one due tomorrow. But if you're outside of that, like the city of Bloomington and the city of Roseville and those places may have money available to small businesses that nobody's talking about. It might be not a very large amount, but I know the city of St. Paul is automatically giving every business $2,000, and then you can also apply for a $7,500 grant. And CPED, which is under Minneapolis, if you go out to their site, they have other different opportunities. So as going back to the lady who asked, when you go for commercial credit or try to get a commercial loan, all the paperwork and everything else, CPED offers a 2% 10-year loan that you can get matched by a CDFI. So that's a heck of a deal if you need to be able to fund some commercial loan money, because that money is forgivable. You don't have to pay it back. City of St. Paul has the STAR program. So all of those programs are available. So those just don't stop at the federal side. Check with your city, see what's available, because if this thing runs farther, you may not be able to get federal money or state money. You may be able to get that. And then the other program is DEED, which we didn't talk about. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was just going to, first I'll say the GAP fund, for those that haven't looked into that, the geographic region is almost entirely North Minneapolis, a little bit of dip into Northeast, and then South Minneapolis. I live 2 blocks out of the range, Powderhorn Park, Central, that sort of South Central part. So it's more economically disadvantaged neighborhoods that they're trying to, so if you live in these neighborhoods, then I haven't been able to find the website right now, but if you go to Minneapolis and look for the GAP funding for that, you should be able to, or even call 311 if you can't find it.
I just posted that in the chat for the GAP fund.
Oh, great. GAP funding. Thank you. So the employment and economic development has the small business SBEL. We're not going to go into it too much. Carrie, you've probably posted the link by now, or can post that link. It was the final link in my list. And that one is, they've now kind of clarified how it's the Minnesota.gov deed page. It's only pertains to people that own like restaurants, bars, hookah bars, theaters, gymnasiums, amusement parks, country clubs. There's a very long list, but I would be surprised. I thought that because I run a bed and breakfast and we serve food, I might qualify. I didn't. So we're not going to go into it because I'd be surprised if hardly anyone does qualify that. But I do, if you think you run a public accommodation place like that, then please take a look at that website and see if you might qualify and apply.
And the only other comment I'll make is if you have a potential second business, or you have a family member that might have a business that could qualify that is affected by that, they need to get that in. And also that the state of Minnesota is looking at another $30 million into the program where they might loosen that up. And if they do that, then all businesses, we're hoping they'll open that up and loosen it up a little bit, because you guys do get affected. You might not own the building that you may be in for the work that you're doing, but you are definitely a tertiary or a second party affected, because when they close down, you guys don't have any work. So the state is considering that to loosen that standard up. If they go to the next round, that is a beautiful program. It's $35,000, 0% interest. Half of it's forgivable at 2 years. really nice way they're working the program. So hopefully they'll include more folks in it. We know that they're running out of money at this particular point in time, but we're hoping that the state will own up to it and put another 30 million into it, and that should open it up and loosen up the standards for a bunch of other folks to apply. So we'll let you guys know if that happens. We'll send it out so you can get a broadcast email out to your members and make sure that they get on that from that standpoint. So yeah, that program got really confused, and you got to be one of the people in 2004 order by the governor and 2008. So if you look those up or if you want them and read through them, but airport restaurants didn't get included. Like you said, catering didn't get included.
Very specific, yeah.
So it's very specific.
So take a look at it. Maybe someone you know could qualify for that money, but nobody I know does. So, but just take a look at it. So now we can pass it over to Kelly if you want to help us split into small groups. And we think we'll probably, because there's only 16 people, should we divide into 2 groups? People who are interested in diving more specifically into unemployment and people diving more specifically into loans? Not hearing you, Kelly. Oh, Kelly, you're muted.
I unmuted everyone except for myself.
Okay, great.
So is anyone interested in talking about the where's my $1,200? Or do we all understand that at this point?
You can post in the, because a lot of
or
you
you
don't
can
have
just
cameras.
holler out if you're,
there you go, there you go.
You want to talk about that. Okay, so then I'm going to break out a room about unemployment. Does anybody want to go into the unemployment breakout room? You can use the little reaction thing, or you can holler out and I'll just pop you into there. Who's going to lead that conversation? Catherine, are you? Or?
I guess I feel pretty comfortable if there are people that still have specific questions, yeah.
I'll put you in that one. Anybody else want to go into the unemployment room?
What are some of the other rooms?
Right now we're just going to have the loans and unemployment, but if there's something specific that you'd like to talk about, we can create a room on that as well. Is this Bruce talking?
Yep. Yep.
Do you
if nobody wants to come into unemployment, I would be happy to start a room that we can talk about the future of the industry, things that I'm seeing.
Or we can just all stay right here and just have let's just stay here and have a round robin.
Yeah, state of the industry conversation.
I just haven't
great.
received the stimulus check yet.
Oh, the 1,200.
That's the 1,200?
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you follow the instructions yet? Did you go to the link we posted and enter your info and see if you could find out where your money is?
Yes, I did.
And what'd you get?
Not exactly what I found, but I'm going to look at that again.
Okay.
I found what you found, Bruce, which was no real information at all. So I got to figure that out.
Okay.
Right there, Wally.
Everybody's unmuted, by the way, just so we can just have a regular conversation like we're sitting around and we can be
yeah, I brought my Japanese whiskey. I thought if anybody, it's maybe a little early in the day, but I thought.
I have my making shit
you
happen
hear me?
cup. So.
Happy hour. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, hi, Catherine. It's Anita. This has been extremely helpful. I listened to it by phone.
Wonderful.
And my question was, I appreciated the detailed information about that loan for small business, but I don't know that I would qualify for that. I call myself Amaranth Art Studio, but I'm not registered as a business. You'd have to be registered, right?
No, you can talk to Patrick about this.
No, actually registered, when you say registered, you never actually registered with the state of Minnesota?
No, but I'm an artist and I sell my artwork.
Okay, as a sole proprietor, you can file under your individual tax return as long as you can prove your income, which could be either bank statements or you got 1099, so you would qualify.
Okay, and what was the email, the web address for that?
You know what, Anita? Anita's a personal friend of mine. I'll do this one-on-one with you, Anita.
Okay,
I'll help
perfect.
you. I'll help you fill it out yourself.
And
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
we're going to compile all of the links that we've shared into a handout and email to everybody who pre-registered.
Oh, perfect.
great.
Oh, that's
Plus-
great. Okay, that'll solve it then. But I
Yeah.
will talk to Catherine. Thank you.
Sure, sure.
And plus,
And then-
again, if nobody heard this, if you're on the computer, you click on the 3 little links down in the chat, you can save the chat. And then that will save all of those links that Carrie has been diligently sharing with all of us throughout this conversation.
And also, we've been recording this conversation, so we'll put a link on the MN WIFT Facebook page, and I might as well send the link out to everybody that pre-registered as well.
Yeah.
Along with the links.
Yeah.
So
That would be great, because half the people who registered weren't able to make it to be
Right.
live. So that
Right.
would be a great automatic.
A lot of
yeah.
them just signed up so that they would get that link.
Yeah.
So.
right.
Wonderful. Any other?
Nice virtual background, Bruce.
Oh, yeah.
We would also like to hear from you if there are any other, oh, look at that. Very cool. Leave it to production people to have good virtual backgrounds. I'm on the board of WIFT, and if anybody has any great ideas for other conversations that you'd like to have, chat them over there in the chat, or blurt them out right now if you don't have any other conversations. So let's keep this
I'm really
conversation
jazzed to
going.
kind of talk about, I mean, we all have different ideas of how long this is going to last. And I think
Right.
I see this lasting a very long time before, as far as those of us, I don't know what percentage of people on the call are actually in the industry and in production, but probably most of us. I don't see any return to, like, you know, I've worked on movies and commercials that had 50 or 100 people on the set. I don't see that happening in 2020. So there's new ways that things are going to be done, either much smaller, or fortunately, I make a living primarily as a voice actress now. I am working a lot right now. So commercials are still being made. Movies and TV shows are somehow going to still be made, but we're probably going to see more reality in a different way. Like, a lot of commercials are being shot from Zoom and Skype, where the production company will talk to you in advance, set you up, you maybe do your hair and makeup, and this is the commercial, is like someone talking on Zoom, because what else are they going to do right now? Or animation. Commercials can be animated, stock photo, stock video. So anyone that can start shifting their production, if you're a camera person, start shooting stock photo and videos of, like, you know, things without people, or there can always be a person or two in the shot if they keep their social distancing. So I think this is what I'm seeing, is production will keep going on, but it's going to be very different, and it's going to be much smaller and lower budgets, because they're not going to be able to hire 100 people on a movie crew. They're going to hire 10 people, you know, and a
Hey,
commercial.
Catherine, I've heard, frankly, that we are looking until 2022.
Wow.
That is a possibility, depending on when we get a vaccine.
Well, it depends. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
also, hey, I see Amanda Day's on
Oh,
the
yeah.
call now, and this is something that we're working on, but she's been talking with people from Fox Tax, and we want to talk about stuff from a tax perspective. So we're gonna get together another conversation like this in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it looks like they'll be able to have this conversation from both an attorney's perspective and a tax accountant's perspective by next week or the week after.
Yeah, so we'll get that out and post that again on the web, on our Facebook page.
Yeah, just Patrick again, I'll make one comment. If you are in the PPP program and you redeem the debt, what we learned here, and we'll probably get a little more guidance on it, is that redeemed debt on the payroll side of that equation is not going to be taxable.
Tax-free.
Forgivable debt, tax-free.
That's pretty amazing.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
It's about the $1,200. So I went on to the IRS website, and my husband and it asked for all this information for me to fill out, my social security number. And then, but my husband and I filed jointly. So I added in that what we made jointly and how much we actually had to, because I had so much 1099 income, I put my refund, or sorry, not my refund, but how much I owed. It's really interesting because on the April the 15th, like before I even woke up, that money, they pulled it right out. And that same day, people that I know that didn't even apply for it got it put into their account. So it looked like a lot of my neighbors got the stimulus, or what is that program called? The whatever the 1,200 is. They got it immediately on the 15th. It was like they pulled it out of my account and gave it to all my neighbors anyway.
Oh.
But anyway, I just went on that link that Carrie posted and I put in all my information. It doesn't recognize anything. It keeps saying your information doesn't match. Now, do you think that's happening because my husband and I filed jointly, because that's the, I'm just looking for the right verbiage here, sorry. So something's not working. Is there a place that I can call them? Because there's really no other prompts where I can ask questions.
That's a good question, and we haven't been giving out any phone numbers, and that was one of the questions I had earlier too, was are there phone numbers to call places that we could provide people, or...
Right. And sorry, Kelly, my point here, I know that was because they pulled the money out of my account that day, I know they have my banking information for sure.
Yeah.
So they asked for, on that website that Carrie posted, which is the Federal Economic Impact Payments, they asked for my adjusted gross income and then how much I paid. So I put that was right down to the penny, and then, but it's not matching up. So obviously they're saying it's incorrect. There is a choice that you could put in the 2018 information instead, but I just thought if you had any other insight on that.
From my perspective, there's two things. One is that it's not reading you because of the primary Social Security number, and you're filing joint. Is the first Social Security number the one that we're putting in off the tax return, or is it the second one? That's one.
That's a good. I'll check that. I don't know who is.
Okay, so that
yeah,
because
I'm a minority.
Joint, it reads the first character, and the second one is have you exceeded the income cap that makes you not qualified?
Well, here's the thing: is there was a formula online, so we don't get the maximum, that's for sure. But it is a sliding scale, so we were going to get a few $100s jointly, and then we get, for the guy that just walked by, we get 500 for the child. So it showed there is different websites that you can put in your adjusted income, your adjusted gross income, and then how many children you have, and it tells you.
I think there is a call number in there for help or assistance. I think I'll double check that to make sure. But I think I would keep trying, but I checked that primary account number.
Yeah, I'll try my husband.
See that is
first.
And then if you don't get an answer, if you want to email me, I'll see if I can get an answer from somebody why this is happening.
Patrick, could you put your email in the chat as well? You mentioned that your email might be available if people had questions. Is that still possible?
Yep.
And that's very generous of you, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have about 10 more minutes here, right? Are there any other questions?
One thing I wondered for the people that are on the call is, would it be helpful for us to schedule just sort of a co-working open Zoom hour or two where we all just sort of hang out on Zoom while we sit down and take action on some of these ideas? And then as we're running into these issues like Kathy had, go, hey, this just happened. Does anybody know what I do next? And I've been, listening to Jody as she's been applying for things over the last week or two, and it just maybe we wouldn't be sitting all in the same room doing some of these things, but maybe we could help one another as we're running into some of these issues. Would that be sheltering in place, but having some buddies while we did some of this stuff? Would that be a good idea, or is that kind of silly?
I'd be open to that.
Mm-hmm. So
you guys, I have to log off. My dog is really sick all of a sudden for no apparent reason, so I'm gonna go take care of her.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
See you guys.
Catherine.
So we'll schedule sort of a co-working time sometime in the coming week or so where people can kind of do this together apart. And because I know some of this is just Greek to me, Patrick. I know it sounds like you understand everything, but I feel like Annette Funicello in Babes in Toyland, where she's got all those numbers floating over her head and she's like, I just don't get this. So it might help for me to sit there with some other people.
And again, you guys have my email there, and if something comes up, you know, if I don't get back to you right away, I get a lot of emails, but I'd be happy to respond to you. So, you know, I get so many calls, and we're open on the deed questions, so we're getting a lot of them. It's just that added to the emails, and I'd be happy to do that. And I'll try and put Catherine and a couple of y'all on my mass email. When things change, we send a broadcast email out on these changes. So for us, you know, we would like to see y'all participate and get some funding, because we, you know, you've worked hard for your business and you are small business owners. You know, when they say under 500 employees is considered small business, we kind of look at that from a little different situation, saying, okay, one, you know, it happens.
Right.
There is a lot of ones in Minnesota that the state needs to realize they need to take care of also.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, you know, we hope to take something from this epidemic and learn from it when this possibly could happen again, on how we work together and make sure that the state understands that there is a significant amount of people that just get left out. And that should be able to change. So that's my hope. That's why I do some of the work I do. So be happy to take information. I don't really have a mind helping out if I can. I very seldom try and turn people down unless I get to the point where I just can't do anything about it. You know, but I'd be happy to help. So,
well, you can at least point us in a direction that might be helpful.
Yep,
So
I know enough people and networked enough in Minnesota that I can probably send you in the right direction. So I'd be glad to help.
I want to say that I want to thank Patrick for this incredibly grounded information. For me too, it's Greek. I'm very intuitive, and I'm always drawing, and I'm over on the right side of my brain. And understanding this is helpful, because otherwise I sort of dig a hole for myself. I like your idea of a cooperative time for an hour or so if it worked out. I'm actually on the phone because I can't figure out Zoom. That's how techno nerdy I am, but I like your idea. And again, I want to thank Patrick, and I know Catherine got off, but very helpful. My name's Anita White.
Oh, good. Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
I draw all the time. I didn't draw this, but I'll probably draw it eventually.
Great. Well, you can get on with me sometime. This is Kelly, Anita, and I'll help you. I just taught my 87-year-old father and mother how to Zoom. So if I can teach them, I can teach you. So we'll get you on, because we'd like to see your face.
Yeah, exactly. Or I can just post a drawing I did of my face, and that can be me or something.
There you go. That would be just fine too.
Yeah, well, thanks again. I'm going to sign off. I think I've gotten everything I need. It was incredibly helpful.
Great.
And thank you very much.
Great.
Jody, and Carrie, any board members, any final words before we sign off?
Alert from messages. Chris Perron.
Well,
sorry about that.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I was just going to say, look out, because we are going to be doing, like in the next couple of weeks, we'll talk, you know, there'll be other kind of speakers coming out, and like with, you know, not just pertaining to, you know, the CARES Act or whatever, but many different exciting things. So we'll definitely be doing like lecture, educational series things coming up in the next month or two. So keep us on your dial.
Yeah, no kidding.
Thank you for putting this together. It was very interesting and informative, Carrie.
Wonderful.
Oh yeah,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure. And Patrick,
thank
you for all your information.
Yes.
I mean, what a wealth of knowledge.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm sorry I didn't see you were still there. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. If you guys ever need help on commercial lending, or you want something on these programs other than trying to go through the federal government or whatever, at some future point where you have a session, please call me up and I'll give you the skinny on how commercial lending works. So you have a better way to move into the banking industry and some of these other places, and knowing what you have to have in hand, so you just don't get denied automatically because you weren't prepared.
Thank
you. Happy to do that.
I was going to say, Patrick, I'm the woman with U.S. Bank and this has been a nightmare dealing with them. And they keep coming back to me with more, well, you know, we can't balance your profit and loss statement. Well, so we need more tax, all of this stuff. And I wrote them and I said, on Friday, I said, if you're going to make me pay for my leased car, I'm out. And they're not giving me much money. So I guess my question to you, and when you were answering my question, my dog was barking the whole time. So I have to go back and listen to the recording. But in a nutshell, just go on SBA and look at the different places that I could find a loan. Is that what you?
Yeah, I'm saying that if you go to a small community bank and you apply and you leave your application at US Bank, and if there's a question on balancing on profit loss statement for 2019, what they're asking for, you probably can go to a small credit union or a small bank and they'll call you up and say, here's what's wrong with your income balance sheet or profit loss statement. Here's where we're having a problem with it. Or they're going to say, listen, it's not that much money that you're looking for, so we'll just run it through the system and move ahead. So I would recommend that this thing comes open again, because apparently they haven't approved you yet. So
Well, I did apply for the EIDL.
Right.
I do have a number for that. I haven't heard, but no, this has been going on with US Bank for 3 weeks, and every time I turn around, they say, well, we want your tax, we want your filing for 2016 now, and now we want your 2019, and my 19 isn't finished. And so
Yep.
I keep talking to my accountant, and part of the problem is that I work in a couple different areas, but all my income in the last year has been in one area, and it is W-2s and it's 1099. So it's a mess. My accountant has been my accountant he used to do my taxes for $35 and a chicken dinner before he became a partner. So, you know, he knows how the best way to get to put my taxes in. But I'm just over this. It's really stressing me out, and I just would rather see if I get the money from EIDL and maybe go to a smaller.
Yeah, I would go to the small bank and apply again for the PPP loan. But you know what? If they keep calling you at US Bank, you may have an authorization with SBA.
Oh, okay.
And if that's the case, hang in there, because they have 10 days to process after they approved you. So if you can get your accountant to answer maybe some questions for them, or and ask that US Bank, ask them for a contact person that you can call directly.
I have one, and believe me, we're best friends now. She thinks I'm a crazy woman, I can assure you.
No, if she calls you again now and says, okay, you know, we're at this point, ask her if the SBA approved your authorization. And if and say, listen, if I'm approved for the PPP loan through SBA, I'll give you the information. But if I'm sitting in your queue and just waiting, then I don't need to go any further, right? Because I'm not approved. So let's get down to where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
And say, hey, if I'm approved for the SBA, I'm all in. Because then guess what? We'll hustle up and we can find somebody to help you with your taxes to make it balance and make it work. But if I'm not, and I'm just in the queue,
they'll never make it work. They'll never make it work because
at that point. So
I have supported myself out of my own funds, and they want to know why, you know, I'm not making. Anyway, it's crazy. But the SBA, I will ask them that, and I did. And I did talk to my accountant about it, and he said the same thing. He said, if they're going to just keep pushing you, they keep sending me notices I'm 10 days out, and they need to close my package and move on. And
I wouldn't give up that easy, because you want to talk to your accountant, and by all means use me with your accountant, because I can call them, because the money that you're contributing can be put on your balance and income statement as equity or an officer loan, and that would solve the balance problems. And
I own a house.
Yeah.
So
we put that in as an officer loan. You're contributing to your own equity from that standpoint. So there's ways to get around that. So if they gave you the guarantee, I wouldn't let them off the hook. I'd say, okay, you know, tell me exactly what you need. I want a conference call with my accountant, right? So you guys can get on it, because if you got that authorization, that's a big thing, because that means you're approved.
Well, they cut it by a third. I asked for 3 times what they're willing to give me now, but that was also the stipulation to pay off my car lease, which is, I've never heard anything so stupid in my life.
Lease.
So they asked you to pay off your lease with the PPP loan?
Yeah. or before. They
Oh,
said
wow.
you have to pay 3 things, 2 small credit cards, which I pay in full every month up until now, and then over $7,500 for my car loan or my lease, which is a year old. I'm not going to pay off. And I wrote her and I said, I'm not paying that off. And if that's part of the deal, bye-bye.
Well, see, that's not really the parameters under the PPP loan. They're not supposed to be asking you to do that unless they're saying that that's commercial. And that even it's questionable because you're really only working on defining self-employed as payroll. So to put requirements on you seems odd. That seems strange. So
Okay.
When you get a hold of her, ask her if you have an SBA authorization for the PPP loan. If that's the case, yeah, because I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go pay the car loan off, turn around and release it right afterwards again.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you. I'm sorry to take so much of your time.
We can play that game as well as they can. So yeah. So,
Patrick, I have one more question. You keep talking about going to a small bank. Is there a place where we can find a list of, whenever they say, are you a small business? And like you said, they say, 500 or less employees. We're businesses of 1, many of us,
right.
Most of us. Is there a place where we can find a list of those kind of banks that recognize us as a business and those banks that are friendly to people like us and understand us as a business? Or do you?
think there are several in town in Minneapolis area that do that, but most small city banks, I come from northern Minnesota up in the Iron Range, so there's small banks in town there that know me. They've known me for years from when I came there because of my family or whatever. But in the Twin Cities, Sunrise Bank is a good one. Cherokee Bank, Village Bank. All of those guys that are in that category there are not the great big guys. Normally, we'll talk to people on a one-on-one basis.
And is it important to distinguish between a bank and a credit union?
The credit union, the difference is if you talk to a credit union like Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, they're doing commercial loans. Firefly does commercial loans. I think the old Northwest Airline Credit Union does them. I can't think of what their name is. Wings. I would call those guys. And for you guys, I'll be honest with you, credit unions are much more friendly than the banking industry is. For what the sole proprietors are, because they're used to dealing one-on-one, more consumer-oriented, smaller loans. So that's more in their kitchen. So those would be folks that I would talk to. The Wilmer State Bank, these little town banks in those areas have smaller banks. So there's a bunch of them out there from that standpoint. If you don't recognize the name, most likely they're a small bank.
Okay.
First
and that's not a reason to stay away from them.
No, that's not a reason at all. It's actually a good thing because of the fact that they are a community bank.
Okay.
So. Well, and MNWIFT has a couple of accounts with Wings Credit.
Yeah, that's who we bank with.
Oh, you know what? You should call them and tell them you're going to put all your members through them if they're doing those loans, because that's what we do. If you're a client of Meda, we go to those banks because we do a lot of business with them. And we say, hey, will you accept our clients? And they say, yeah, well, then we refer them there. So that's how Sunrise that takes our bank. Choice Bank is another one.
Okay.
So those folks are pretty good, but we're in a little different position because we are lending all the time from folks. So it's a little bit different, but those are the types of folks you're looking for.
I am with Wings, and
then Jody, let me know
now. And there's nothing on their website that says that they work with those loans yet. But I think maybe if I call them directly.
Yeah, see if they do, Bruce. And if they do, then you want to submit the application to them. But I know Affinity said they're taking loans, which is another credit union. I think Firefly. I'm trying to think of the guy with the pickup on the commercials.
Aspire.
They have a commercial loan department, so I'm sure they're doing them too. So I would check with those guys.
Maybe if we did a spot for them, they would give us a deal because their spot really is terrible.
It is. It really is.
Well, we've been thinking about doing a PSA.
I'm not going there, but I agree with you. So it's a little too hokey for me. So
yeah.
All right.
Well, we should wrap it up here.
All right. Thanks.
Patrick, I'll keep you posted. Thank you.
All right. Thank you
so much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye now.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.